Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. It's been 100 days since the Operation Al-Aqsa flood began and the Palestinian resistance on the 100th day of this war showed a massive barrage of attacks against Israel in multiple parts of Gaza. But it wasn't just Gaza that was very intense today. We had a tense day in Yemen, and we also had in the West Bank and Lebanon as well. I'm going to be talking to you about all of these things alongside some important statements from Benjamin Netanyahu and further escalations with Egypt regarding the Philadelphia line, alongside a couple of other very important details. I'm going to start off with Gaza. So 100 days since Operation Al-Aqsa flood began, we have many people in Israel saying that they're living the worst time in their history. We have talks about the end of Zionism, the end of the state of Israel, that everything has failed and people are leaving the country. So I'm going to start off with Gaza. With Gaza, we've had a bit of a quieter day yesterday, and we didn't have much details given from Al-Qassam brigades that belongs to Hamas yesterday regarding their activity. It looks like they kept everything for today. So today they posted many videos where they attacked 6 Israeli tanks and soldier carriers with Yasin 105 RPG missiles, Shuwav planted bombs, and they detonated minefields. And they also attacked Israeli settlements with barrages of missiles alongside Saray al-Quds, the armed wing of the PIJ. So in Gaza, they posted videos in multiple locations of them going out from tunnels, tunnel openings, directly a few meters apart from tanks, hitting them, exploding them, annihilating the living daylight out of Israel. And that's in North Gaza and in Khan Yunis. But Khan Yunis is facing the most fierce battles. Now remember, Israel is fighting with 8 brigades in that part, and yesterday they had a partial withdrawal of 1 brigade. But despite that, the resistance is showing them hell on earth when it comes to fighting them in Gaza. We saw a couple of actions where they dragged Israeli soldiers, lured them into tunnel openings and detonate them, alongside the other videos that they published. In Lebanon, it was still intense, not very intense, but we still had activities. Israel had what they called preemptive strikes on multiple parts of Lebanon, and Hezbollah still attacked some posts of the Israeli army. We had an intense day in the West Bank as well. Side bombs in Jenin, handmade side bombs against Israeli vehicles in Jenin. And yesterday, we had the Palestinian resistance in the West Bank targeting a settlement near Hebron as well. So things are not toning down. We obviously have the report of the US coalition attacking a Yemeni naval base, which is another escalation against the Yemenis. Now, I spoke about what's happening in Yemen in more detail yesterday. They had a bit more activity with the airstrikes of the coalition on Yemen. But another thing that happened today is apparently Joe Biden sent a message to Iran to try and not expand this war, and they stated that they're having talks with their allies regarding a potential escalation that they're fully in charge of when they're supporting this genocidal state and the satanic death cult in Israel. We have a very important update from the Egyptian borders too. Now, ever since a few weeks ago, Israel had talks about them controlling the Philadelphia line. The Philadelphia line is the Rafah border between Gaza and Egypt. They've had an agreement in 2005 that deals with all of the security issues when it comes to this line. Now remember, since the beginning of the war, Israel tried to push the Gazan population to Egypt. This was met with strict Egyptian refusal. They knew that Israel wanted to get rid of the whole population and that they wanted to bring back the settlements because they have a plan to get rid of the Gaza population since a very long time ago. And that's why Israel targeted Gaza so heavily in the beginning of the war, in their brutal, barbaric attacks against civilian buildings, hospitals, and any lifeline in Gaza. This wasn't targeting the Hamas, this was targeting basic day-to-day institutions to make Gaza uninhabitable. You need to understand that and remember that very well. All the talks about eliminating Hamas, it's all nonsense. Now even, they're talking about eliminating Hamas. They almost got rid of them from the northern part of Gaza, yet they carry out massive attacks against them in the northern part of Gaza. They said we're almost done with all of the tunnels in Khan Yunis. They launch missiles in Khan Yunis, and they choose these dates deliberately, like they had their hostage swap previously when the ceasefire began in the northern part of Gaza as to challenge Israel, to tease them. When they spoke about them controlling Khan Yunis and the tunnels, they carried out even more operations and launched strategic missiles on Tel Aviv and central Israel. And today they're showing again on the 100th day of the war, we're still here, we're continuing, we're fighting Israel until the end, and you cannot kill the Palestinian resistance. And Israel doesn't have any significant accomplishment when it comes to this war, apart from the genocidal barbaric acts and grave destruction for civilian buildings, hospitals, churches, mosques, bakeries, and anything to do with the day-to-day life of the Palestinians. Now, with regards to the Philadelphia line, Israel claims that there are still many tunnels. They're likely right, okay? However, Egypt says we don't have any tunnels. And as a matter of fact, Egypt had the campaign around 10 years ago, and they did get rid of many tunnels in Gaza. However, there is likelihood of there being tunnels there, but Israel cannot prove it. It's based on their assumptions. Obviously, they can be very secretive, but Israel says there are tunnels and we need to control them. We want Egypt to have more strict measures. We want them to have more sensors in the area, more cameras to detect any movement. And we want you to tell us, Israel is telling Egypt, we want you to tell us when there's an alert and anything of the sort. But Egypt is saying, no, we don't want to tell you. We're happy to put more cameras, but we're not obliged to tell you about anything that happens. So Egypt has a particular sensitivity when it comes to Israel controlling the Philadelphia line, but they're not outright saying that we totally reject you carrying out an operation over there, which led Sami Abu Zuhri, who's a senior figure in Hamas, to ask Egypt for a clear position when it comes to the Philadelphia line. Now, if Israel does go ahead and take control over the Philadelphia line, this would be a breach of the Camp David Accords, even though the Philadelphia Agreement happened later on. But to them, with the previous agreements that they had in Camp David, they would consider it a breach. Now, you need to remember, Egypt breached the Camp David's Accords de facto by having so many soldiers in Sinai and equipment and tanks, etc. However, this will give them another excuse to increase their activity in Sinai. However, Hamas is not fully reassured with the Egyptian position. Now, this could be another one of those moves from Egypt to do whatever they want, however, not to let it reach a very high boiling point with Israel. They're known to deal with Israel like that throughout the years. I mean, even when you spoke about the previous regime in Egypt with Mubarak, they knew very well how many tunnels there are and where they exit in Egypt, but they let them carry on. And Egypt used to consider previously, at least, Gaza to be a strategic front against Israel. They didn't want Israel to be directly on their border in Gaza and have forces over there, and they would rather that there's a strong Palestinian side, keeping Israel busy and not to them. However, tensions are rising slowly, and Israel is treating the Philadelphia line as a management through objective thing to prolong the war. Because you need to remember, Netanyahu wants any excuse to prolong this war. And if he goes down to the Philadelphia line, you're talking about a very, very long procedure. I mean, we've had 100 days now, and they didn't catch the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the tunnels. As a matter of fact, many analysts and people on the ground say that they haven't touched anything significant from the tunnels, and anything they did find from the tunnels is what the Palestinian resistance wanted them to find. Because remember, the Palestinian resistance, They have dummy tunnels. They have tunnels they want to drag Israel to. And as a matter of fact, they detonated many of them in Israeli soldiers, with Israeli soldiers in them, including the son and the nephew of Gadi Eisenkot, who's in the war cabinet. Both of them were killed inside booby-trapped tunnels, dummy tunnels, that Hamas detonated in the Israeli soldiers in Gaza. So if you're talking about the Philadelphia line, and with these increased tensions in Lebanon and the region, you're talking about a prolonged war. And this is exactly what Benjamin Netanyahu wants, particularly with the massive split in Israel that I will be talking about shortly, especially after the Netanyahu statements. But Benjamin Netanyahu wants it to be as long as possible. He knows when this war is done, this is the end of Benjamin Netanyahu. Which leads me to his statement, his press conference that he had a couple of hours ago, Benjamin Netanyahu, when he said, "No one will stop us from continuing this war. Not the Hague, not the ICJ, not the axis of evil, and no one else." He reiterated no one is going to stop them from continuing this war. He's very keen on prolonging this war. He said that what the world is doing is outrageous. He obviously pulled out the anti-Semitic labeling again, that they're attacking the only Jewish state, and that they will not stop them from carrying out this operation. And he also reiterated these lies. We found a Mein Kampf book in one kid's room. We found another little girl's tablet with Hitler in the background. Imagine how stupid these claims are, this pathetic type of evidence. You've had the Israeli president holding a Mein Kampf book, saying that they found it in a child's room in Gaza. And Netanyahu is repeating it now and saying that they found a tablet in Gaza with a background of Hitler belonging to a 4-year-old girl. What kind of stupidity is this? And he's trying to compare Hamas with the Nazis. Imagine, he's saying that Hamas are like the Nazis, and we thank the German Chancellor for describing them as such and for supporting us so well in the ICJ. Imagine how pathetic this is. You have so much evidence about Israel committing an act of genocide by words and by actions, and they can't hold on to anything but these little pathetic lies to try and somehow relate what the Palestinians are doing to them to what happened in Germany. Imagine how pathetic that is. Then he continued to say that we're gonna spend much more money on security. And I just wanted to comment on this quickly. Israel's been spending so much money on security, so much money, yet they haven't got their security. And it's because they haven't dealt with the root cause of the problem. As a matter of fact, in the 7th of October attacks, Al-Aqsa flood, Hamas penetrated a wall that Israel just renewed 2 years prior, spending $1.3 billion with masses of steel, with so many sensors over the ground and under the ground. All of this time they're telling us about security this, security that, despite the fact that they spent so much money previously, yet they don't have any security. As a matter of fact, the worst place for any Jewish person to live is in Israel right now. This is supposed to be the safe haven for Jewish people. A massive lie. Again, Zionism speaks on behalf of Judaism, right? But this is the worst place for any Jewish person to live in. They constantly live in fear, constantly anticipating another war, managing the situation from conflict to conflict. They don't know what's going to happen the next year. Sometimes they don't know what's going to happen the next month. And today we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. What kind of a state is this? And this just highlights that you're never going to be able to reach peace and security without justice and equality. You must implement justice and equality to reach security. You wouldn't have Hamas, you wouldn't have Palestinian resistance if you had equality in this land. So these people, they're just warmongers. They want to spend so much money on ongoing wars, endless wars, at the expense of people, their own people and other people. They're using the Israeli soldiers, 18, 19-year-olds, brainwashing them, indoctrinating them, using them as cannon fodder, sending them to die for no reason whatsoever. Getting them killed, they're going back in coffins in their thousands. They're creating a generation of people with PTSD, hundreds of thousands. Now you're talking about being treated for PTSD. And some of them even had the statements in the Israeli Knesset going mental about what they went through. So they're torturing their own people. It's like a death cult, as I always describe it, a death cult, a war machine, a death machine. This is what they do instead of actually focusing on reaching a solution for everyone in that country. You're talking about insane people, lunatics, running this country, being supported by Western governments. Imagine how bizarre that is. If it was any other country, you would have had military action taken against them, removing them from power, especially with the level of friction and how torn the society and the government is in Israel, the ruling party, the war cabinet. You can easily instill someone else and tell them, listen, you need to completely get rid of this apartheid state. Otherwise, we have no control. We can't protect you. Yet, United States, the United Kingdom, their governments, obviously, I'm not speaking about the people. I know many people refuse what their governments are doing, but you need to remember that when we talk about these things, we don't mean the people, but I need to be obviously accurate with what I say. These governments, they insist on this genocidal death cult. And he continued that we will not compromise in his press conference. We will march until victory. But he also mentioned how people are not trusting him. Now, you've had so many warnings from security leadership in the IDF, in the Mossad, previous leaders of the Mossad, saying that you cannot win this war. Tone it down. You have different objectives in the war cabinet between him and Yoav Gallant. They're so split, even though Yoav Gallant is part of his party, the Likud party. He sacked him last year when the protests were going on in Israel, and now they're so torn from within. You have calls in Israel to instill Benny Gantz as a prime minister. People are asking him to resign from the war cabinet because the recent polls show that he's way ahead of Netanyahu if any elections happen at the moment. So Netanyahu said in his press conference, I know many analysts and many figures are saying it's not possible, but me and you, imagine he's speaking on behalf of the people as if everyone agrees with him, me and you tell them no, it is possible and we will march up until we reach victory. This guy's delusional. He's insane. He's a psychopath leading a death cult. That this is the situation in Israel. I mean, even radical Zionist figures, some of them, they don't agree with him. And you need to remember, he is leading the most extreme right-wing government in Israel's history. I mean, in many ways, he's doing us a favor because he's showing what Israel has always been about, although they try to hide it. And the people who are against him are aware of the level of damage he is inflicting on Israel. If Israel stopped this war a week after, or immediately after Hamas carried out the 7th of October attacks, they told them, hold on, let's reach a deal, go back, we'll have a prisoner swap, we'll try and reach a peace process. Most people would have probably been on the side of Israel, but by prolonging it and actually committing these atrocities that Israel always does on a low heat and slowly, they showed the whole world the full picture, despite the fact that mainstream media tried to protect them as much as possible, despite the fact that you constantly hear so many lies. They made themselves untenable. And I mentioned this before, Israel has done what no other Palestinian or pro-Palestinian campaign has done ever in history when it comes to the awareness of the situation. People are waking up to their lies. People are reading up about the Nakba, about how Zionism started, about how Israel started, about how much they've been lied to for all of their life. So they did us a favor by doing all of that. Yet this guy is still persisting, and it's not looking that we're going to reach a solution anytime soon if this continues. You've had deadlines from the United States administration that Israel didn't listen to, and you've had threats, and you've had them saying that we can't indefinitely support you. You have so much criticism from the world, so much pressure to stop the war. You have countries that supported them fully in the beginning of the war, like France, now criticizing them. Even Blinken, for heaven's sake, is talking about how the Gazans are suffering. And this guy is continuing. You have the court now. You have the ICJ. It's not stopping him. He's a maniac and he's being enabled. That's the problem. Yet, you have the United States administration, the British government and their coalition going and attacking Yemen for imposing a blockade on Israel, which is what they should be doing. Going against Yemen, attacking them for trying to stop this lunacy, this genocide, this ethnic cleansing campaign. I mean, do we have anyone with an ounce of sanity in power? What is this? And where are you leading us to? World War III? Is that what you want? Because this is what it will eventually lead to. You have a psychopathic lunatic, Benjamin Netanyahu, leading a satanic death cult, as it always was. But now it's more highlighted, right? And it's more clear to the masses. Leading the whole region, potentially the world, into oblivion. What if you have Iran joining? Is Russia going to be quiet? Is China going to be quiet? We've had Egypt still quiet, right? Do you want them to join? What are you going to do? Are you going to send more troops to go and die for no reason? For this lunatic death cult of a state? So with the latest developments here, it's not looking that this war is going to end anytime soon. Especially with the fact that Israel has a maximalist approach at the moment. And the side that they're fighting, the Palestinian side, Hamas and the Palestinian resistance, they're also all out. They want their full rights, and rightfully so. The Palestinian side is on the right side, and they want their rights, but Israel isn't willing to budge in, isn't willing to compromise with anything. And this shows that we might be looking at a really, really long war that can lead to a massive escalation throughout the whole region and potentially the world. So these were the main things that I wanted to talk to you about today. I hope I shed some light as to what's happening and added some beneficial information for you. And I will see you soon in the next video. Take care.